Well, it's legislative week on Conduct Detrimental, and I have the distinct privilege and honor of welcoming to the podcast two influential state lawmakers that I've known for several years who were first movers on sports betting legislation in their respective states. Joining me today is Indiana State Senator Shawn Fluharty and West Virginia Delegate Shawn Fluharty. Did I pronounce your name correctly, Shawn?
Fluharty, that's close enough.
Okay. In addition to serving as state legislators in their respective states, they also play a very prominent role in an industry conference that's just around the corner that is known as the National Council of Legislators from Gaming States. Senator Ford is the Vice President of Finance, and Delegate Fluharty is the Vice President of Membership. And you guys really rolled a lucky seven with this conference. You're holding it in Boston, Massachusetts during the time, and it's going to take place July, I think, 6th through July 9th, a long weekend in Boston, Thursday through Sunday. The Yankees are going to be playing in Fenway that weekend, and it's also right in the middle of the conference committee negotiations for the legalization of sports betting in Massachusetts. So, Shawn, welcome to Conduct Detrimental. First off, tell us about the NCLGS conference. What is it all about? Why is it so important? And how did you end up choosing Boston this year, this time when this issue is front and center?
Well, thank you for having us on the show. I appreciate it very much. And, NCLGS, we've always take input from legislators across the state, across the country, from our colleagues, and really heard they wanted us to go to the Northeast and Boston. Who doesn't like to visit Boston? And as you said, we kind of got lucky. We didn't know when we picked Boston that Massachusetts would be debating sports wagering. And certainly, at least I didn't know that the Yankees and Red Sox would be playing.
Oh, come on. Really? That was just a stroke of luck?
Well, I'm an Orioles fan, so I don't really pay attention to either group. But, we're looking forward to the conference. We've got a great slate of speakers. And it's going to be a good conference for legislators that are dealing with gaming to come and learn a lot.
Okay, educate our audience which may not be familiar with NCLGS. It's an acronym for the National Council of Legislators from Gaming States. Shawn, who attends these conferences? Who is part of the membership, just so that the audience can understand really why this is such an influential group of lawmakers and why it's so important within the industry?
Dan, thanks for having me. It's always great speaking with you. I know years in the making, and you've always been at the forefront of sports betting, especially the legal side and legislative side. So happy to join you today. So NCLGS is comprised of nearly, I believe, 21 to 22 member states currently. And every conference we have two a year, a summer conference and a winter conference. And legislators obviously also comprise membership of NCLGS, but also regulators are involved. And if you look at all the panels that we have in our summer and winter meetings, we really have kind of the who's who, not just legislatively, but in the industry itself. For instance, in the upcoming Boston meeting that you talked about, actually it's July 7th through July 10th are the dates, just so we have that accurate for the record. But
I include going out the night before as part of the conference.
Everybody wants to go out the night before. I mean, that's how you break bread and make things happen. But Jason Robins, the CEO of DraftKings, is going to be a keynote speaker that we just announced today, actually. So it's a bit of a breaking news for you, Dan, as far as who will be there. We also have representatives from the state of Massachusetts, including Jerry Paracella, who is actually the chair of the Committee on Economic Development, where I believe the sports betting legislation currently resides. And like you said, this is a great time to be in Massachusetts because they are at the forefront of the next states that we've seen, like these coming waves that are on the brink of passing sports betting legislation. And obviously they have some issues. I know on the Senate side, they want to pass legislation without collegiate sports being part of the legislation versus the House side where they want to make that part of their bill. So that's kind of the rub and that happens in between the lines legislatively. And we're happy to be in Boston. And we sit down as a group before we decide on which cities to go to. And we talk about who's next, who's at the forefront, what's the next wave looking like, and what cities can we go to that provide a great conference on one end. Look, we're going to go to the Red Sox-Yankees game, which I've never been to a Red Sox-Yankees matchup. I'm looking forward to that. And I'm sure many attendees are as well.
Yeah. What's the sort of the value for, lawyers, law students, anyone who's not a lawmaker? Why attend the conference? Really, what kind of, I imagine, and I've experienced it, first time I ever spoke at a conference was Nickel G's winter conference, Hollywood, Florida. It was January 2014. That was my first speaking engagement ever. It created a monster. Right now, the first time I ever spoke anywhere. Now you can't shut me up, but I understand full well the networking that goes on at the event. But why is it so important and valuable for people in the industry who aren't lawmakers, and maybe even for law students who are interested to learn more about the industry? Where do you see the value in attending a conference like this?
Yeah, I mean, I think the strong value, for legislators, these are panels designed by legislators, moderated by legislators, really to help give us input from the industry and from the legal community on questions we may have. But for the industry, it's that networking with legislators, and they can help put forth ideas to help move gaming forward in various states.
Yeah, I mean, you could forge relationships with other people within the industry, with lawmakers. I remember we had dinner, right? We had dinner in Miami Beach a couple of years ago. I don't think it was part of a Nickel G's conference. So that was like one way that we could get to know each other better. But on the flip side, I don't think the meal worked out very well for you. So they sort of counterbalance each other sometimes. You have your positive experiences, and then I think overall it was a great meal. But tell us about some of the panels in particular that might be of interest to folks that are interested in sports betting and the gaming industry. You're going to have some of the professional sports leagues, casino operators, gaming companies. You mentioned Jason Robbins, and you're going to also have lottery officials. Tell us about some of the programming that's going to take place in early July in Boston.
Well, one that really stands out that I'll actually be chairing is one that's going to relate to sports leagues. And Dan, as you know, when we're on the brink of PASPA being overturned and states were lining up, I know West Virginia had already introduced legislation. We were moving it forward, and we actually passed it prior to PASPA being overturned. But the sports leagues played a big role in that, in the sense that they were really against it from the get-go. They wanted their integrity fee. They wanted all these different things lined up in sports betting legislation that they didn't necessarily get. And now we're going to have a panel which includes, I want to make sure I get everybody right here, Dave Friedman, who's Executive Vice President of Legal and Government Affairs for the Red Sox. And we're going to have a panel about where the sports leagues are now, how has it played out for the sports leagues, and where do they stand now on the issue of sports gaming going forward. And I think it's going to be one panel that really sets us apart from many other panels that are out there that are related to sports gaming or the betting industry in general, is that you're going to have people like myself there who have gone through the process, passing legislation and the positives and detriments that come with that. And at the same time, those who are within the industry and within the leagues themselves chiming in on this and giving us their positions, and how have their positions changed since PASPA was overturned. And now we have nearly 2/3 of the country with some sports betting legislation in place.
Yeah, John and Shawn, your states were among the first. I think Delegate Fluharty, West Virginia was the first state to enact a sports betting law after the U.S. Supreme Court oral argument, in which the tea leaves. I mean, you could read the tea leaves. You knew that the Supreme Court was going to overturn PASPA. You were the first state, West Virginia, to react and pass a law, and I think Indiana came soon thereafter. But your states represented sort of the first efforts by the professional leagues. The NBA, Major League Baseball. I think the first integrity fee bill came out of Indiana. And there was like a battle royal in West Virginia over trying to, shoehorn the integrity fee within the bill, and they got the governor involved to try to hang up the legislation. So can you give us some context about your experiences in dealing with some of those asks by the professional leagues, and how that debate unfolded, and what was sort of how it went down? Because it all began with your two states.
Yeah, Dan, you have a great memory, because they came in at the 11th hour. So I was first elected in 2014. Obviously, our legislative session starts in 15. And one of the first bills I ran out, sports betting and iGaming. And I understood where we were at. I practiced law, as you know, Dan, and I knew that PASPA was, we had running through the courts, and we knew this is a great chance for us to get out in front of something. There's one issue I always have with West Virginia: we're usually last in line on things. So this was an opportunity for us to be first in line. And you're correct, we were first in line. And at the 11th hour, the leagues are looking at little West Virginia. They weren't necessarily concerned with, the 1.8 million people that we have here who may be participating in sports betting. They were concerned with the precedent that it would set, that if a state like West Virginia is first out the gate and we don't have an integrity fee, how does that influence the rest of legislation coming down the pike, like in Indiana and other places? And how will that work out for them? So they came in at the 11th hour. They hired all the big guns. They had a closed door meeting with our governor in West Virginia Lottery, and that all played out in the media. And I believe you even came on statewide radio because we were friends at the time and said, Dan, this is a huge issue. Get on the radio here and let's talk about it here in West Virginia. And they wanted their integrity fee because there's relationships with the governor's office and Major League Baseball and the PGA in particular. And Major League Baseball brought their guns here and said, hey, look, we're going to have this fight out here on the House floor. They had their little one-pagers ready that were put on all the legislators' desks. But quite frankly, it was too late. We had the votes. We had the educated legislators who knew when I was pushing this 2 years prior that this was going to happen. They already knew what was going to take place. And I explained to them, we're not giving them that integrity fee. No way in hell are we giving them this integrity fee because we've worked too hard to have a great bill in place and we can't have it touched by outside influences at the 11th hour.
John, the integrity fee emerged for the first time in an Indiana bill. I think that was sponsored by a lawmaker other than you, even though you were the ultimate architect or one of the chief architects of the Indiana sports betting law. Can you explain how that process unfolded and what kind of discussion or debate emerged around that issue within Indiana?
Yeah, so here in Indiana, we had two bills, my bill without an integrity fee and Representative Morrison's bill with a fee. And we had a big debate about it. And really, like Shawn said, it came down to education. Really spent the time to educate my colleagues in the House and the Senate. Similar to West Virginia, the big guns were hired and a lot of pressure put on us by major league sports and even IndyCar racing, which, here in Indiana has a huge influence. But through education, really we're able to nullify that bill and it didn't get a hearing. My bill moved forward and, we got, I think, a very successful rollout of sports wagering.
All right. Since you're first out or first movers in sports betting, you've had an opportunity to see dozens of other states approach sports betting in a slightly different manner. And you're beginning to see tax rates begin to creep up. Tennessee, 20%, Pennsylvania, which was prior to both your states, 34%, but some of the recent ones in New Hampshire, New York State, 51%, Massachusetts. On the Senate side, they're looking for 35%. Your states are probably near the lowest strata of tax rates around sports betting in the country. West Virginia, I don't know the exact rate. It might be high single digits, low teens. Well, how much?
10%.
And Indiana, what's the retail and online tax rate?
9%.
Is there any opportunity or any desire to revisit some of these tax rates in light of recent events and seeing how much money other states are generating by sports betting? How difficult would it be to revisit a bill? Is this something, top of mind in the future as states begin to look at some of the second and third mover states doing things somewhat differently?
Well, I think here in Indiana, we've not had any discussion about increasing the rate. When we were going through the process, it was really important to keep the tax rate low so that we could bring the gray market, black market into the sports wagering environment. And I think when we look at other, items, other industries, like the cannabis industry, states that have taxed that at high rates also have high black market rates. So using that as kind of an example, we've been able to, really keep the tax rate low. And, and I would encourage every state to keep a low tax rate on sports wagering because there's not much margin at the end of the day in sports wagering.
Yeah, I think John's spot on. And at the time, we really had no model to work off of. We hired Eilers and Krychek, and we did our due diligence in understanding what the participation rate would be in West Virginia and how we could bring people into West Virginia at the time. And I think that's still the consideration, as other states will as well. These other tax rates that are outrageous in their number, we'll see how that plays out down the road. I think you're going to find states like West Virginia at 10% aren't going to move where they're currently at, and states that are upwards, like the New York situation, they're going to come back down to earth at some point. I can't see that playing out. And I think, Dan, as you know, these companies are coming in, spending a lot of money, especially in the advertising side, trying to capture the market, but they're also there, knowing that iGaming is coming down next. That's the next move. And that's the real incentive for these companies to kind of take it on the chin with these tax rates right now, because they know that down the road, the return on their investment through iGaming is going to be substantially more than it's going to be through sports betting. And it's going to be probably 2 to 3 times more, and in some cases, even more than that. So they want to capture that market, and they're willing to take this high tax rate right now. But I think if you start talking to them, especially in New York, they're not real happy. I've seen some gripes coming out on social media, and you and others as well, and it's a real issue. So I don't think that we will be changing our position. I think you'll see states like Indiana and West Virginia potentially look at different classifications of licenses being available. The state of Maryland, for instance, is doing that, as you know, Dan, and other states are looking, if you're going back, you can't really rewrite everything, but you can expand in certain areas. I think that would be something when you have participation with bars and restaurants, they want a piece of the pie as well. And there's pros and cons to all that. And we talked about that with Nickel G's in Maryland recently. That's something I think you'll see as the next move for states like ours.
Well, let's talk about that, because Indiana and West Virginia passed their sports betting laws way before these professional sports teams began to push to be included in the sports betting licensing system. And since your states went online, Maryland, Ohio, Arizona, and bills pending in other states like Missouri have carved out online and retail sports betting licenses for the professional sports teams on that state. And I noticed, Shawn, that one of your panelists on the Major League Sports Betting panel is an executive with the Boston Red Sox. In your efforts to expand the handle and maybe even lure professional sports franchises to your states in West Virginia, Senator Ford, Delegate Fluharty, is there any appetite to expand the marketplace and expand the ecosystem for sports betting to allow the teams to be part of the licensing system? Do you see upside associated with that? And would that help a state like Pennsylvania, a Commonwealth like West Virginia? Are you a Commonwealth or a state?
State.
You're a state. A state like West Virginia.
Virginia is Commonwealth.
Okay, that could be instrumental in trying to lure professional sports franchise. Kansas recently did that. They're going to create a trust fund where 80% of their sports wagering tax revenues are going to be earmarked towards attracting a pro sports franchise. So what kind of interest would there be in some of your states for allowing the teams to be part of this licensing system?
Yeah, I think here in Indiana, the teams have access to different licenses that the casinos, brick and mortar casinos have. And they have not really approached that. What the approach they've done is created these lounges with high-speed internet and areas for people to come and enjoy gaming while watching events. But I've not heard from any of my major league sports about having specific licenses just for them.
You may now, if they hear this.
If anybody wants to bring a professional team to West Virginia, which we currently lack, I will roll out the red carpet on any piece of legislation they want, because we desperately need a professional sports team. We have the West Virginia Mountaineers. That's our professional sports team. We have Marshall University. They have a unique perspective in our state compared to others because they are considered the professional sports teams here. And that's why things like legislation coming out without collegiate sports would never make any sense here in West Virginia, and quite frankly, does not make sense in any state. But if Major League Baseball wants to bring a team, then I'll roll out the red carpet and so everybody else if they want to bring a team into the state. And I know the Commanders are looking to.
Dan Snyder has a for sale sign on his franchise. Highest bidder, most public money, most sports betting revenues will get the team.
The Eastern Panhandle in West Virginia sits right on the border. They could hop right over. We'll make it nice for them. We have a beautiful casino over there, great scenery. We'll roll out the red carpet. But yeah, Danny, I think sports wagering is going to open the door for league expansion, which I think is your point here. And I know just last week, LeBron James made the comment he wanted to bring a team to Las Vegas, right? And which they've had sports wagering for many years, but now it's full front and center, and it's something that I think participation rate. People are watching these games longer. I mean, if you're in the NFL and you're watching the Browns game, and they've been horrendous for many years. I'm not a Browns fan. That's why I'm kind of throwing them on the bus right now. But you're going to watch the games longer. And that's revenue for everybody. That's revenue for the leagues. That's revenue for advertisers. That's revenue across the board. And that's why I was vehemently against the integrity fee because they're going to make a lot of money already under current legislation that's pending in many states and ours at the time. But to the point is now with all this participation that was not revenue generating participation prior to legalization. It was all black market. They weren't making money, maybe in Vegas a little bit. But beyond that, now we have revenue generation that we haven't seen before for these leagues. And I believe it was Mark Cuban at the time that said basically the Dallas Mavericks and every owner under the sun has basically doubled the value of their team. And I don't think he's wrong. I mean, I'd love for him to come back to Pittsburgh, his hometown, which I live nearby, and buy the Pirates because we could desperately use a team in Pittsburgh as well for Major League Baseball at this point. So I think we're going to have just a unique situation for expansion if you are an operator and if you are a league owner. And you've seen it, Dan, the participation with the leagues now. I mean, you can't turn it out. We had our conference in Chicago, and I went to a Cubs game when we were out there. This is our most recent conference in Chicago. And the sports advertising for sports betting was all over the place around Wrigley Field. And I thought to myself, wait a minute, Major League Baseball, who won't let Pete Rose in the Hall of Fame, is now a participant in sports wagering, and they're happily doing so. And they're the ones who came to West Virginia and said, well, we don't want this current piece of legislation. We want an integrity fee. And, you know, how things have changed in just a few years. And I'm looking forward to that conversation at Nickel Cheese in Boston because I think it's going to be a unique perspective.
Yeah, well, Massachusetts is seeking to restrict that kind of advertising. It may not be as ubiquitous in the sports venues as it is in other states. They're going to impose, if the Gaming Commission and Senate have their way, a restriction on the type of ads that can be placed in the sports venue in a way that wouldn't be disruptive of the viewing experience. But I guess that's a conversation for March. Let's turn to iGaming. You know, you've been fond of saying, and I think both Senator Ford and Delegate Fluharty have their own experiences with trying to pass iGaming legislation. But Shawn, you've been on the conference circuit and speaking circuit, trotting out the great golf metaphor that sports betting is for show, iGaming is for the dough. Can you elaborate on that point and talk about your efforts to bring iGaming to West Virginia and some of the struggles that legislators in a multitude of states face in trying to bring iGaming to fruition when they've had much more success with sports betting and fantasy sports?
Yeah, so sports betting basically sucks up all the oxygen in the room right now. And because it's very popular, people understand it, they know it, they participate in it. iGaming, which iGaming, your iCasinos, different ball game. So in West Virginia, we were able to pass sports betting the first year and then run it right back in the second year and pass iGaming. So we're one of the first of the few states to have both operating and functional at the state level. And I think that's obviously the next wave. 2/3 of states are now online with sports betting. You're going to see states moving into the iGaming area because if you're an operator, that's the space you want to be in. And when I say that, it's the golf, metaphor you're talking about, Dan, is drive for show, putt for dough, and sports betting. It's sports betting for show, iGaming for dough. And what I mean by that, if you're a legislator and you're looking at prospective legislation and you're already getting into the gaming sector and you're talking about sports betting, it makes perfect sense to move right into iGaming. Ideally, you'd want to do it both at the same time, but that's a heavy haul for a lot of legislators. Gambling legislation is still not super popular with legislators. Well, maybe we need to elect some younger legislators who are okay with it. But I remember when we were on the circuits to begin with, Dan, everybody talking about sports betting, politicians get scared. They're scared of their own shadow. They might lose a couple points. They don't know. So you have to, as John said earlier, educate your colleagues as to what's happening with this legislation and why it's a positive move for many states. And iGaming in particular will bring you more money than sports betting, more participation. And if you're an operator, obviously that's where you're going to have a return on your investment more so. So it's beneficial to both states and the operators who want to come into that area.
Senator Ford, why has it been such a challenge to pass iGaming legislation in Indiana? If memory serves me correctly, you've had bills authorizing iGaming in 2 or 3 successive legislative sessions. They haven't gone anywhere. Could you talk about some of those efforts and the challenges you face and that other lawmakers across the country face in passing an iGaming bill when over 40 states have casinos, 35 states allow sports betting, and almost an equivalent number of states or more have state lotteries and other forms of gambling? Why has it been so difficult?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I think kind of the success of sports wagering has made some legislators nervous about the success iGaming may have here in the state of Indiana. But also, COVID in the mix, and some other major legislation that we've had to work on kind of is taken the forefront. But it's also, again, education, right? A lot of my colleagues really don't understand what iGaming is. And, we have to educate them that it's going on in our state right now, regardless if we legalize it or not. There's illegal games that people can get on online, and they're doing it here in Indiana. So, bringing this into the regulated market is, going to be a way, I think, that it moves forward. We're pretty healthy financially, so that statement that, we may need it financially, we just don't need it financially here in Indiana right now. So we've got to take a different route. And I think proposing that black market route is going to be how we get it done. But I think this year, we're bringing a lot of people to Nickel G's. Where Nickel G's has got a number of panels focused on iGaming. One panel specifically on iGaming and emerging forms of gaming. iLottery, I think Shawn's got a committee that will be taking that issue up. And then I think we've got some discussions on the Wire Act, which is something that is important to iLottery and iGaming.
Yeah, speaking of emerging forms of gaming, I'd be remiss to talk about sports betting and not bring up esports. In other regulated markets in other countries, sports betting and esports often go hand in hand. Yet esports has been slow within the United States to enter sort of to be legalized and to be a form of betting that's folded within the sports betting legislation. So why has it taken so long for esports to achieve almost parity with sports wagering? And I know, Shawn, you've had some of your own efforts in West Virginia get really, really close. So can you tell us about the status of the West Virginia esports betting bill and where you see esports fitting in down the road? And I guess I would open this up to both of you.
Sure. So that's, we always want to be at the forefront. That was my argument when we passed sports betting originally. That was my argument for iGaming, as well as my argument was raising revenue without raising taxes. And I think, as John pointed out, a lot of these states are not seeking the money they're used to seek, because a lot of those COVID funds are still there, but that's drying up. And I think, back to your point on iGaming, these states are now going to start looking at iGaming as a revenue generator. And I think you're going to see a wave hit soon. But with esports, we did clarify this past session, which I argued our sports betting legislation was broad enough and could be interpreted to already allow for esports. But we did pass legislation this past session clarifying that esports is allowed now in West Virginia, even though I believe it was prior to. But that's the next wave. You see out west, it's very popular. It's very popular with younger generations. And it's something that certainly, if you're looking at expansion and always evolving with the times, that's the next thing coming down the road. And I suspect, and that's why we'll be talking about it at Nickel G's in upcoming conferences as well, because that's always going to be at the forefront. What's next down the road? I think the licensing issue with states, as we discussed earlier, is coming down the road, and esports obviously comes in with that as well.
Yeah, John, anything to add on the esports? And I want to talk about iLottery as well, because I think less than 10 states have internet-based lotteries, which is like shocking to me, given how prolific the use of the internet is. So any chance of esports receiving widespread recognition legislatively in the coming years?
Well, I think there's a few things that legislators struggle with on esports. Is one, there's no major league that's regulating it. And I think also just that perception that it's kids, that kids are playing it. And the reality is there's a whole industry, and it's not kids, and they're professional, and they have leagues, and they fill up places all across this country. And so I just think it's, again, back to education, right? That let people know that it's, there are leagues out there. And I think the leagues are forming and getting better and, becoming more mainstream. But I do think that that's a part of it, especially when you talk with regulators. They're concerned that, some of these leagues don't have enough regulations in place to cover cheating. But iLottery is, here in Indiana, we're probably going to have that iLottery debate this next session. And, I think, again, it goes back to, how successful we're with sports wagering. Are we ready to move to iLottery to really allow people to do it without going into brick and mortar facilities?
Yeah, Shawn, you're hosting or moderating a panel entitled, I guess it's the Committee on Lotteries. You're going to have Greg Smith, the president and CEO of the Connecticut Lottery, which, by the way, is overseeing sports wagering to some degree in Connecticut. You're going to have May Sheave Reardon, the director of the Missouri Lottery, and they've been immersed in this debate within Missouri over video lottery terminals, and there have been struggles in trying to get sports betting passed. So all these topics that we're discussing today, they're going to be front and center at the NCLGS Summer Conference in Boston, Massachusetts. So you got to tell us how, if anyone's interested in attending the conference, and if you follow the gaming industry and are part of the gaming industry or just interested in it, this is the best conference in terms of educational panels, learning about where the industry is headed, trends, policy debates. There's no comparison to the NCLGS Summer Conference. So John, Shawn, tell our audience, our listeners, how they can attend the conference. Is it sold out? Is there a way to still get tickets? How much? Give us the down and dirty details, because I think this is if you were to pick one or two conferences in the gaming space to attend every year, this is one of those two.
I'll go with it, John, for now. NCLGS.org, you learn about the conference at NCLGS.org. You learn about the conference, you can sign up there, become registered. If you are a state legislator, you will get a stipend if you're from a member state, and that would help you for travel and getting there and your hotel accommodations. And if you are somebody who wants to learn more about it, or if you're an operator, regulator, it doesn't matter. You're getting every perspective at NCLGS. You're getting the legislative perspective, which I think is super unique to our conference compared to others, because you're going to have people like John and myself who know the inside baseball on how legislation gets passed, the pros and cons, how to get a bill across the finish line, which I think many states, and you follow them regularly, Dan, many states are trying to do right now for both sports betting and iGaming. You're going to get the regulator side. You're going to get people who serve on commissions, and kind of the fight within intrastate fighting that you have between the lottery side, the commission side, the regulators, and those in between will all be there with their perspective. So it's kind of a merging of every angle and view that I think makes up the entire gaming industry as a whole. And it's something that is very unique to this conference. I would argue is one that is not available at any other conference. So it makes it unique. And you talked about, Dan, if you're a law student or attorney, for those that can get CLE, you can get CLE hours for these conferences that we have, which again is another perk if you're looking to come out. So
I've gone to 8 years worth of these conferences. I've never seen a law student attend any of them. And yet all of them
doesn't make sense.
All of them come up to me. How do I break into the industry? How do I meet people in the industry? Well, just go to the NCLGS conference, go to one of the leading gaming conferences, and invariably, none show up. And I find this one of the most bizarre occurrences. I'm sure there's some lower rate for students, and I would highly encourage law students and young lawyers to attend this conference. It's in Boston in early July. You can meet Shawn, John, myself, some of the leading state lawmakers in the gaming space, operators, people who are, important executives at their various gaming companies, operators, suppliers, and then on top of that, Yankees Red Sox 4-game series and some of the best Italian food in the United States on the North End. So I'm anxiously looking forward to the conference July 7th, 8th, and 9th in Boston. And if you want to attend or want to learn more about the conference, go to nickelgs.org, and the agenda for the conference and registration details are going to be all there. All the information you need. It's being held at the Westin Copley Hotel in the, I guess, where's that area within Boston? It's I don't know, it's not too far away from anything. It's near Fenway, but there's so many hotels in Boston, so there should be ample hotel space. If you're interested in attending, just go to nickelgs.org. Senator Ford, Delegate Fluharty, thank you so much for joining me on Conduct Detrimental, and I look forward to seeing both of you in a few weeks in Boston in what's shaping up as a really timely and important conference, especially in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, as they begin trying to debate the issues around sports betting and find some type of compromise that would make Massachusetts the 35th state in the US to legalize sports betting. But overall, this is going to cover the national spotlight and scope of gaming legislation across the country on casinos, horse racing, esports, iLottery, sports betting, and it's going to be a terrific conference. I look forward to seeing both of you there in a few weeks.
Well, thanks for having us. Appreciate it, and look forward to seeing you both in Boston.
Thanks, Dan. I'll see you guys there.